All right, we'll start into just so you remember if you want to chat. I see you're both doing it anyway, but that button over in the bottom left-hand corner there to open up the chat window. And if you want to ask me questions at any time, you can write over there or you can unmute your microphone to pop in. So this session we are going to mostly review the urinary system. So we are into Unit 4 at the moment, which is a relatively short unit, but it doesn't cover a whole lot of material, which is kind of nice after Unit 3, which I feel like is kind of a hefty one and can be a bit tricky for some folks. So thankfully Unit 4 is not quite as bad. So based on some of the assignments from Unit 3, I just wanted to review a few points that can be very tricky when it comes to the immune system. So I have a slide here, tiny immune system review. So just some things to keep in mind. So quite a few people, well not quite a few, but a few people in the assignments kind of mixed up what antigen and antibody. So they're two very different things, but it sounds very much the same. So the first being an antigen. So that is essentially the marker that's on the outside of a foreign cell. So a pathogen, like a virus or a bacteria, will have this little marker on the outside of it, which is an antigen, and it is what will trigger a response from our immune system. So antigen is associated with the bad guy, so it's always on the pathogen. So an antibody, on the other hand, is actually made by our own B cells. So an antibody will cause invaders to clump up together so that our phagocytes can detect them easier and eat them. And it will also kind of make it harder once the antibody has, attached all around a pathogen, it makes it harder to infect our body cells. So antibody is good. It's made by our own B cells and it attacks the pathogen. So adaptive immunity, so that's that third line of defense, and adaptive immunity is the one that triggers very specific pathogens. So it will adapt to what your body is being exposed to. So if you're exposed to the flu virus, a certain strain of the flu virus, your body's going to adapt to that and respond with its third line of defense. So whenever we're talking about adaptive immunity, one way to keep it straight from the other types of innate immunity, so adaptive immunity, if we're talking about T cells, B cells, or clonal selection, those three things always have to do with adaptive immunity. So the other part of that, like phagocytes, natural killer cells, the inflammatory response, those are not part of adaptive immunity. They don't attack specific pathogens. They don't care what it is they're going after. They will eat or kill anything that has those antigen markers on them. So they're actually part of our innate immunity. So if we're talking about those things, it's innate, not adaptive. And so one difference that to keep in mind between B cells and T cells, so B cells are the ones making our antibodies, remember, they can detect those pathogens with the antigens on them directly in body fluid. So if that B cell is inside one of your lymph nodes, it can detect that there is a pathogen nearby right there in the cell. On the other hand, T cells, if there were a T cell sitting there in your lymph fluid beside, say, a flu virus, it's not going to know it's there unless that flu virus is inside the body cell. So T cells can only detect that pathogen once it's already invaded into your body cell. So hopefully those things make sense. If it doesn't, then I would suggest going back into your immune system, read up on adaptive immunity especially, and then come back and read this as kind of a summary of some of the main points that people can find tricky. Okay, so Unit 4. I have to keep checking to make sure I'm saying the right unit number. Yeah, so Unit 4 is homeostasis, and more specifically the urinary system. So we've already talked about homeostasis some already. So thermoregulation being one of them, controlling our body's heat, and how it relates to most things that are most of homeostatic mechanisms in our body uses those negative feedback loops. The example or the analogy we gave was the heating system in your house. So another way that our body stays relatively unchanged, even though the world around us will change, is through our urinary system. So it plays a huge role in homeostasis in our body. Our body has all kinds of solutes like salt, hydrogen ions, calcium. It has all kinds of solutes. It also has water that needs to be regulated. And then we also need to get rid of wastes in our body. So our urinary system plays a big role in keeping all of that relatively unchanged. So if you've ever had a urine test at your healthcare provider's office, so it's really, you're peeing into this little cup here, and whoops, sorry about that, and then they dip this strip inside of it. So it has these little pads. Let me get a pen here. These little squishy looking pads on the strip here will all detect different things in your urine. For example, one might show that you have sugar in your urine, which is common that they test for, to see if you're giving off a lot of glucose in your urine, you could be developing diabetes. It might say whether or not you have blood present in your urine, which could show like an infection happening in your urinary system. It can show the acidity in your urine. So it's detecting all kinds of different things that could be normal or abnormal in your urine. So osmoregulation. So this is the main. Let me see okay, so this starts on page 468 in your textbook if you're following along there. So osmoregulation is just the term that describes the control of water and solutes happening in your body's fluids. So salt would be a big one there, going along with one of the solutes that's in your body fluids. So osmoconformers, for example, could be an animal that lives in the ocean, that whatever the ocean environment's water and solute content is, that's kind of what their body's going to go with. So that's one reason why a saltwater fish will not survive properly in fresh water, because its body needs to be regulated by that salt in the salt water. And the opposite is true of freshwater fish. If you go and put him in the ocean, he will die pretty quick because the salt water is not going to conform to what his body needs. So humans, on the other hand, are osmoregulators. So we can regulate the amount of water and solutes happening within our body kind of regardless of what's going on. So we can swim in the water, in the ocean or in fresh water. That's not really going to affect us. So one thing to note, so humans are losing water all of the time. So this time of year we're sweating a lot. So that's one way we lose water. We lose it through urination, so defecation, and even breathing. So just by breathing out, moisture is leaving our bodies. So starting with the urinary system, we're going to look specifically at a part of the kidney. So if we take out one of these sections on the outer part of the kidney, so there are all kinds of names for the anatomy happening here. You don't necessarily need to know different, like what this part of the kidney is called, for example. But we are going to get a bit into the functional unit. So in the past, we've talked about functional units like the alveoli being the functional unit of your respiratory tract. Well, the nephron is where all of the hard work happens for your urinary system in your kidneys. And so these nephrons, where in this picture it looks huge, but literally there are millions and millions and millions of these tiny little nephrons throughout your kidney working at filtering and regulating your blood all the time. So let me just take a peek here. Okay, yeah, we'll go with this. All right. So I'm going to talk about the 4 functions in the nephron. We'll look at a diagram, and then I'll actually draw the diagram out to describe the process as we go through it. Okay. So 4 key functions of the nephron. So filtration. So your blood pressure will actually help in this process. So blood flows into your kidneys. Filtration happens within the nephron. So this is forcing a lot of water and a lot of small molecules and nutrients out of the blood. So it goes into this little space or tube in your kidneys, and it makes something called filtrate. So if we just ended there, and then that filtrate was excreted from your body as urine, we would dehydrate very quickly. We would lose all kinds of salts and minerals and things that we actually need in our body. So some other steps have to happen. So number 1, filtration happens. So as it flows through the nephron, these other 2 things happen. So this will kind of refine that filtrate so that we're not losing all of that water and all of those solutes that were filtered out in the beginning. So we're going to reabsorb some of the water. We're going to reabsorb some of those valuable salts and things into our blood. And then during the process, we're actually going to secrete a little bit more back into the nephron, back into that filtrate. So sometimes drugs, they're something that go back into the filtrate. Sometimes some little extra salt or whatever will go back into the filtrate. And then the step 4 is excretion. So excretion is actually urine leaving your body. So some of this might make a bit more sense as we go into the diagrams. So this is showing your blood flow coming from a renal artery. So remember, arteries are going away from the heart, so they have, a higher blood pressure, they have higher oxygen levels. And it comes into the nephron at this point. So this has a name. We're not going to worry too much about that, but there's this big clump network of capillaries here. And so this is where a lot of that water, salts, and things are forced out into the nephron to make filtrate. So again, this is very basic. If it has a lot more water and solutes and nutrients forced out of here than we want to happen. So as this filtrate is actually going through the tubule, so this is part of the nephron, that's when reabsorption and secretion will happen. So reabsorption means that we're taking back some of that water, all of these green arrows, so it shows them going back into our blood supply. Like we want to take back some of that water, we're going to take back some of the valuable solutes and nutrients and things. So it's really kind of concentrating down that urine or the filtrate. And then along the blood vessels, some things that didn't make it out in the filtration process will actually come back into the filtrate. So drugs sometimes are one. So secretions going from the blood back into the going into the filtrate. So once it's all refined and has traveled through the tubule, then it will become urine, and eventually it's going to be collected in a part of the kidney, then it's brought into the bladder, and then excretion means that urine is going to the outside of the body. So one thing to point out is urea. So if you ever have a blood test done to check your kidneys, they will check the level of urea in your blood. And so urea is a main compound that you find in urine, and it's actually a waste product from breaking down protein. So as you eat food or your body gives off proteins, once they are broken down, urea is given off as a byproduct, and it's actually one of the main things that make up urea, or make up urine, sorry. And if you have a lot of urea building up in your blood system, that can be a sign that your kidneys actually aren't working correctly, because urea should be excreted in your urine. So I'm going to flip over to a whiteboard here. So I've pre-drawn a nephron here, and you'll have to excuse my drawing, but sometimes it does help to see things drawn as they're explained. So coming away from our heart, we have this renal artery that's high oxygen. It has lots of nutrients and things in it, but it's also carrying waste products, solutes, so some of that urea we just talked about, and it's entering into the kidney and entering into one of these, billion nephrons that are inside your kidney. So it comes together into this clump of capillaries inside your nephron, and this is where filtration is happening. So lots of things are pushed out of your blood system into this very first part of your kidney right here. So it's actually called a Bowman's capsule, but you don't really need to know that, but that's where you're first getting filtration happening. Let's add an arrow. So filtration happening here to make filtrate. So then our arteries are continuing out here, and they're actually going to flow along outside of our tubule. And eventually we'll just say they turn blue because then they're leaving as low oxygen. Okay, so we've made the filtrate. My pen back here. So I'll move this over here to show that we have some filtrate now inside of our nephron. Okay, so it's always going to flow in this direction, so it's going to keep going as it's refined. So the whole point of this loop happening here is to refine it so that we are not giving off too much water and too many valuable things. So our filtrate's flowing in this direction. So as it goes there, we have some reabsorption happening. So some things like water and valuable things are going to be flowing back into our bloodstream out of the filtrate. Oops, I didn't want that guy. But then some secretion will also happen, so that means that some things like drugs and things that weren't done in the beginning when the filtration happened will still go into the urine out of the bloodstream. Okay, so by the time it reaches the end of the nephron, here it's actually now urine. And it's going to continue to flow into the main part of the kidney, through the ureters, into the bladder, and then out of the bladder it will be excreted. So one thing that plays an important part in all of this, and I stuck this guy here to remind me, is antidiuretic hormone. So we'll probably mention him again in the endocrine system, but this hormone plays a very important role in the urinary system. So if you can you think of something that you've heard of as a diuretic? You can write it on the side there if you want, or use your mic. Can you think of something you know of that's a diuretic? Coffee, that's right. Coffee is a diuretic. Anything else you can think of? Alcohol is actually considered a pretty big one. So diuretic, so what happens when you drink coffee or drink alcohol? You pee a lot. So diuretic means you are going to pee more. But your body can detect when you're getting dehydrated. So it gives off something called ADH, or antidiuretic hormone. So antidiuretic means it's actually going to make you pee less. And so this hormone makes you pee less, so it's actually allowing your body to keep more of its water in order to fix being dehydrated. So it's actually going to make you reabsorb more water back into your bloodstream. So if you're reabsorbing more water thanks to antidiuretic hormone, that means your urine is going to be more concentrated. So if you are dehydrated and your urine looks very like a dark yellow color, that is mostly thanks to antidiuretic hormone, because it's allowing your body to reabsorb more water out of your urine in order to fix that dehydration. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint. So here's an example of a question. So nephrons perform 4 key functions. So those are the 4 we just talked about. So A here, oops, let me get a pen. A, so forcing water and other small molecules from the blood to form filtrate is, you're right, filtration. I can't. Filtration, that's right. I love my writing with this thing. B, so of water and valuable solutes back into the blood. That's right, it's reabsorption. Reabsorption, yep. C, so of certain substances such as ions and drugs into the filtrate is secretion. That's right. And then the last one is blank of urine from the kidneys to the outside, and that's excretion. Good. So being familiar with those 4 processes probably be important on your quiz. So the assignment in this unit is making a concept map. So this is a very basic example of one. So starting with a fever, and then this concept map is saying it can be dangerous if it's 40 degrees and above, so it can actually damage your body cells. And then it makes a connection between, in humans, 38 to 39 degrees Celsius, that can actually help fight disease. And then it gives this a natural response to infection between this arrow. And then it's making a connection between killing off invading pathogens. So part of what a fever can do with this temperature is to kill off invading pathogens. It's going to show you an example of making a concept map with the cardiovascular system. So let me find that. So I have some terms here, which is similar to kind of what I gave you in the urinary system, but this is for the cardiovascular system. So it's good. I like to start with the bubble that's probably going to be, the main one or the top one. So in this example, I'm going to start with cardiovascular system. So let me make him a bit bigger. Okay. So I know the cardiovascular system is divided into 3 major points. So this may be one way I know the heart. Hello, welcome. I'm just going over how you could make a concept map. So we reviewed most about the nephron, so it is being recorded, so I'll post that. So we're just I'm giving you an example of how you can make a concept map with the cardiovascular system. So cardiovascular system, I know it's made up by blood vessels, the heart, and blood. Those are the 3 main components. So let me grab this one. And so a concept map always has arrows that are connecting different things. And then along those arrows, you may want to write the cardiovascular system. For example, I could write right here, made up of, as part of going along these arrows. So next I know blood is made up of red blood cells. Nope. It's not agreeing with me. Platelets, and I know white blood cells are part of it. So this is just a quick example of how you can make connections between things. And you can hand write your concept map if you want, as long as when you take a picture of it or scan it, it's clear that I can read what it says. That's important. Or you can use, there are programs you can use online if you are into technology like that. I can show you one that's kind of fun to play with. So this is very basic. So I could also add something like connect these 2 together, like arteries lead away from the heart. So you can add little pieces of information along the arrows, however you want to make the connection. So that's just an example of how you might want to make a concept map with the terms I gave you for the urinary system. And let me show you the program that I have for for making a concept map. So I'm just going to slip to my desktop. I'll show you the website. So Mindomo, so mindomo.com is kind of a fun one. You can sign up for free. And once you get into the program, you can click on Create. You can make a blank concept map, which is what the assignment was. Oh, we can name it. You click Create, and you can play around. I do not want to upgrade. I do not want to tweet about it. Oh, it's loading. Oh, no. I don't know, I did something wrong here. Anyway, once you press create, it should come up to get you started. Maybe I'll just show you this one. I guess my internet is being very slow. And there are other programs on the internet that you can use as well for concept mapping if you just Google it. Oh, well, my internet is being too slow. I will just go back to where we were. But if you want to try it out, you can go to that website. So I just had a couple of, since I did that very brief immune system review in the beginning, I thought maybe a couple of more questions about that might be useful. So here's one question. You can click directly on the screen. Which of the following cells will produce antibodies? B cells, phagocytic cells, cytotoxic T cells, natural killer cells. B cells, yeah. And you can click directly on the screen as well on which answer you want. And you are correct, it is B cells. Those are the ones that produce antibodies. Okay, let me find our next question. Which of the following is a function of antibodies? So act as a marker on a pathogen to flag it, essentially eats the pathogen like phagocytosis, causes pathogens to clump together, making it easier for the body to get rid of, or D, destroys virus infecting cell. So it is, you're correct, it is, most of you are right. So it's C, causes pathogens to clump together, making it easier for the body to get rid of. So one person did pick destroys virus infecting cells, so that would actually be the cytotoxic T cell or even a natural killer cell. So the T cell or the natural killer cell actually destroys the body cell that already has a virus or bacteria or pathogen inside of it. So the correct answer for this one is causes pathogens to clump together, making it easier for the body to get rid of. Okay, I think I have one more immune system question. A cytotoxic T cell can destroy invaders in our lymph fluid, blood, interstitial fluid, or body cells. And you guys are correct, it is body cells, so it can only act against a pathogen once it's already inside of our cells. That is correct. Okay, so I have a few urinary system review questions. So ADH hormone has what effect in the dehydrated human body? So ADH will increase the amount of water reabsorbed from the nephron. Will more fluid enter the nephron by filtration? ADHD will decrease the amount of water reabsorbed from the nephron, or ADH will increase the amount of urine output. Okay, if you answered A, and that is correct. So antidiuretic hormone, that means it's going to allow your body to keep more of its water to kind of correct the dehydration. So it's going to increase the amount of water reabsorbed from the nephron. So it's reabsorbing it back into your bloodstream out of the filtrate. Okay. All right. Our next, I guess that's it. I thought I had one more, but oh wait, I do have one more. The urinary system. What is ADH? So that's the antidiuretic hormone. So on the whiteboard, so a diuretic is something like coffee or alcohol that makes you pee more. So antidiuretic hormone is actually antidiuretic, so that means it's going to make you pee less. So it's actually allowing your body to keep more of its water. So it's a hormone that allows you to keep more of your water. Okay, so this one, the urinary system uses negative feedback to control the acidity of the human body. So that's the amount of hydrogen ions that are floating around in your body. And you're correct, it is true. So like most homeostatic mechanisms, most of them are negative feedback, and the urinary system with acidity is the same. Let me see if I have one more. I might have two more actually. So excretion is the movement of substances from blood to the filtrate. True or false? So the answer here is very 50-50. So more of you said false, I guess, than true. So excretion is actually the fourth step in the nephron. So that is actually urine moving outside of the body. So if a substance is moving from the blood to the filtrate, that's actually secretion, starting with an S, secretion. So the answer to this would actually be false. Excretion is the movement of urine out of the body. So a lot of them, excretion and secretion sound very similar, so it's something to make sure you learn well as you're studying. Oh, here I gave a tip here. Secretion is the movement of substances such as drugs from the blood vessels into the tubule of a nephron. True or false? So most of you picked true, and that is correct. There, I think that's all of the, that's all of the practice questions I have. And so that's it for review for Unit 4. I already have Unit 5, which is the nervous system, ready to post. So I'll post that soon. And hopefully, do you all have your tests booked for your proctoring? So test number 2 is due on or before the 13th, which is this Friday. And so if you're studying and finding something that you could use a better explanation for, don't be afraid to ask. There's always that Q&A board on the unit that you can post questions and I can reply to it. Or if you feel like you'd like a recorded video going over specific things, then just let me know. Do any of you have any questions going into our test or this unit? Yeah, if you have questions, if it's private, then please send it in an email if it's like a private matter. But if it's a question about, something to do with D2L or the material you're learning, I would prefer that it be posted in the Q&A board on the unit, because if you're wondering something, other people may be wondering the same thing. And so it just allows me to be able to answer in one spot rather than answer the same thing in 4 or 5 emails. So don't be afraid to ask questions. If you're wondering, other people probably are as well. Is that your question? If someone was bitten with a scorpion, can they survive if they're immune? Is that what you're asking? Well, scorpion, most of the time their sting is similar to like a hornet or a wasp, so you just have a local reaction. Some people could have an anaphylactic reaction to it, and they would never become immune to it if they're going to have that sort of reaction. But yeah, people can survive being bitten by a scorpion. Well, there's so many different types of scorpions, it's probably difficult to become immune to their stings, actually, because they're giving off a toxin. And so while your body can react to it and help get rid of that toxin, and you can develop memory cells that are there, but because they're different types of scorpions with slightly different variations of toxins, it's probably difficult to become immune to all of them. I hope you haven't been bit by a scorpion. If you have, please call 911. Yeah, if your immune system does not clear the toxin properly, and depending on the type of scorpion, some have worse bites than others. If your immune system can't clear it, and especially if you have an anaphylactic reaction to it, then you could die. Yeah, you can, whatever it was you were reading, you could definitely post in the Q&A so we could take a peek at it. I'm just going to stop recording.